Before Christmas, a girl went to her bedroom and vanished without a trace in the middle of the night. This case immediately attracted colossal attention, and over 3,000 people joined the search. Meanwhile, detectives uncovered some shocking facts that eventually led them to solve this high-profile case. Sarah Foxwell was born on May 18, 1998 in Salisbury, Maryland, USA. She grew up in a very large family, with 2 sisters and 4 brothers. Additionally, her mother had 3 children from a previous marriage. However, Sarah's parents separated, which caused her mother to face serious difficulties. She needed to provide for all the children on her own and look after them. The woman was forced to work a lot, so the children often stayed with relatives. Sarah was the middle child and the most positive among her siblings. When her brothers and sisters fought, she did her best to reconcile them, and most of the time, she succeeded. In December 2009, when Sarah was 11, she and the other children temporarily moved to her aunt, grandmother, and grandfather's house. Christmas was coming, and her mother was working more than usual, wanting to buy gifts for each child, so she took on extra shifts. Sarah's aunt lived on the outskirts of Salisbury, in a large farmhouse. The children loved this place. The house was on a large property, giving them practically limitless space to explore. December 22 was an ordinary day, with just 3 days left until Christmas, and the children were in high spirits. They ran around the house, playing and having fun. For dinner, their aunt ordered them pizza, and around 9 p.m., they started getting ready for bed. Sarah shared a room with her 6-year-old sister, Emma. The room was at the very end of the corridor, next to the back door. The girls talked for a while and then fell asleep. The next morning, Sarah's grandfather woke up and went to wake the children. He entered Sarah and Emma's room, but found only the younger girl there. The man thought Sarah had already woken up, but she was nowhere to be found in the house. He mentioned this to her aunt, and together they started looking for the girl, checking every corner. Realizing Sarah was not in the house, her aunt thought the girl might have gone outside to play in the snow that had fallen overnight. However, the woman quickly realized that Sarah's shoes and jacket were still at home. Soon after, the aunt noticed a very strange detail. She looked in the bathroom and discovered that Sarah's toothbrush was missing from its usual place. After they searched the area around the house and didn't find Sarah, the aunt decided to call her mother. The woman immediately came over, and they called the police. Officers arrived at the scene and began by inspecting the house themselves. Sarah's aunt mentioned that every night before bed, she checked that all doors and windows were locked, and she had done so the previous evening as well. The police checked the entire place, but there was no sign of Sarah. Given that the girl's toothbrush had disappeared from the house, they immediately considered the possibility of abduction and soon found further confirmation of this theory. Officers double-checked whether all windows and doors in the house were indeed locked. When the police approached the back door, near which Sarah's room was located, and pulled the handle, it opened. The girl's aunt insisted that she had locked the door the previous evening and that it had not been opened since. However, she quickly remembered that a spare key was kept outside the door. She immediately went to check if it was there and, to her horror, discovered that the key was missing. This only reinforced the abduction theory. Given that the perpetrator knew where the key was, they must have been well acquainted with her family. Another fact supported this. Their dog did not make a sound that night, although it always barked at strangers. Based on all this, investigators immediately commenced an extensive search for the girl. News of Sarah's disappearance spread rapidly in the vicinity, and many people expressed their desire to assist the police. The sheriff appealed to them through the media, asking everyone to check their properties for any suspicious items. In addition, dozens of police officers were immediately involved in the case. Not only did all staff from the local police station come out to work, but colleagues from neighboring towns and even states came to assist, all hoping that the girl would be found alive. Given that the criminal apparently took her toothbrush, he might have planned to hold her somewhere. Therefore, the police put all their efforts into the search. The first clue awaited them in front of the house. On the snow, they noticed relatively fresh tire tracks and speculated that the abductor might have arrived in that vehicle. Since all of Sarah's warm clothes were left at home, the criminal clearly could not have taken her away on foot. Meanwhile, Sarah's relatives were brought to the police station, where something unexpected happened. The 6-year-old sister of the missing girl, who had slept in the same room, tugged at her grandmother's sleeve and whispered that she had a secret. She had seen the person who took Sarah. According to the girl, she woke up because this man was talking to her sister. Emma didn't understand what was happening but was scared, so she pretended to be asleep. Some time later, she saw this person leave the room with Sarah. This story shocked her relatives, but they were in for an even bigger shock. Emma said that she recognized the man. It was Mr. Tommy. The adults immediately knew who she was talking about. It was 30-year-old Thomas Lex, the aunt's former boyfriend. They had broken up a few months earlier, but until then, the man had spent a lot of time at her house, and all the children knew him well. But the police knew Thomas even better, as he had a significant criminal history. Over the years, he has been on their radar for offenses involving violence against women and girls. The first time he went to prison was when he was 18 years old. Back then, Thomas abused a 12-year-old girl and received 4 years in prison, but was released just a few months early. The man was later sentenced to 7 years in prison for abusing another minor, but for some reason he was again released early after just 6 months in prison for good behavior and was on the outside. Shortly thereafter, he received another 6 months for abusing another girl. He also attempted to assault another girl on the very day his wife came home with their newborn daughter from the hospital. His wife later divorced him and obtained a restraining order against Thomas because he threatened to kill her and their daughter. Another incident occurred after a woman and her young daughter moved in with him on the same street. The girl was sitting on the porch of her house with a friend, and at one point Thomas approached them. He told one of them that he had been watching her play in the yard and called her a wild girl. He then grabbed a branch and began hitting her on the buttocks. The girl ran home and told her mom what had happened. The woman noticed Thomas through the window and realized she had seen his face before. Before moving in, she went to the rapist registry in the new neighborhood, and there was a picture of Thomas. Before the trial began, the woman was asked not to mention that Thomas was on the rapist registry and had previously been convicted of abuse. The reason for this request was the fear that if she did so, the court would be biased and Thomas might be unfairly sentenced. Just a few months before Sarah's disappearance, Thomas came to the attention of the police again. He snuck into the 24-year-old woman's bedroom in the middle of the night, stripped and began satisfying himself while standing next to her bed. The man was arrested, but he posted bail and was released pending trial. Thomas successfully hid his criminal past from Aunt Sarah, but one day she found out about his crimes anyway. However, the man somehow managed to convince her that all these accusations were false and he had not actually committed any of the things he was accused of. Considering all of the above, detectives had no doubt that Thomas was the one behind Sarah's kidnapping. Her relatives also pointed out that during the times when the man was dating her aunt, he paid much more attention to Sarah. At the time, no one paid much attention to it, but after the disappearance of the girl, this fact seemed quite disturbing. The police immediately went to Thomas to interrogate him. The man lived just a few kilometers away in a barn on his parents' property. Investigators took him in for questioning and then obtained a search warrant for the barn. The barn was in disarray and had terrible living conditions, but no evidence linking him to Sarah's disappearance was found. However, the police discovered a large collection of pornographic magazines and DVDs. The barn was literally filled with them. During the interrogation, Thomas immediately began to deny any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. He claimed he was trying to cope with his problems, referring to his propensity for committing crimes against girls. Thomas said that during the times he dated Sarah's aunt, he deliberately never stayed alone with the children so that no one could falsely accuse him of anything inappropriate. When told that Emma saw him on the night of the abduction, Thomas claimed that the girl often made up stories. The detectives didn't believe a word he said, and it wasn't just because of Thomas's criminal past. Talking about the disappearance of 11-year-old Sarah, he constantly smiled and sneered. The sheriff thought that Thomas believed his crime was perfect and that the police couldn't prove his guilt. However, the man claimed he had an irrefutable alibi. That evening, he allegedly was at a bar with a friend until late at night. Investigators immediately checked this information, and surprisingly, the alibi was confirmed. Thomas was indeed seen at the bar, but there was a catch. He left around 1 a.m., and no one, including his parents, saw him until 7 a.m. Interestingly, when examining his phone, they discovered that that night Thomas sent messages to several female acquaintances proposing to meet up, but all of them declined. However, detectives couldn't break Thomas. Hoping the girl was still alive, they threw all their resources into searching for her. Seizing the suspect's pickup truck, the police immediately found several serious clues. Inside the vehicle was Sarah's green toothbrush and a large lollipop. Investigators speculated that Thomas might have used the sweet to lure the girl into his truck. Additionally, the tire tracks of the pickup perfectly matched the tracks left in the snow in front of the house on the night of Sarah's disappearance. The man had told detectives he hadn't been at the house for over a month, and now they had proof of his lie. With the suspect continuing to deny everything, the police had a hope to find Sarah on their own. Several hundred officers and volunteers began searching the area, covering many kilometers around her home. They checked abandoned buildings, forests, ravines, and bodies of water. K-9 units with search dogs tried to pick up the girl's trail, while helicopters surveyed the area from the air. From the very first day, this case received a colossal response from local residents. They came to the police station to volunteer, despite the bad weather and the upcoming holidays. Unfortunately, the search that day yielded no results. However, the police were not ready to give up and resumed their search with the first rays of the sun the following day. Throughout this time, the flow of compassionate local residents did not just continue, it increased. In total, 3,000 people joined the search. The sheriff even had to move the headquarters to a large baseball stadium because the police station simply could not accommodate such a large number of people. Notably, the volunteers included not only adults but also their children. They distributed water, hot tea, and food to people. Everyone tried to contribute, hoping that ultimately this would help find Sarah alive. Meanwhile, investigators received the first conclusive evidence linking Thomas to the abduction. As soon as the man was brought to the station, he was issued a new set of clothes, and his own were sent to the laboratory. Experts found foreign DNA on the suspect's underwear and matched it with a sample from Sarah, obtained from the girl's belongings. The result was a complete match. Considering where the DNA was found, detectives came to a grim conclusion. It seemed that Thomas had assaulted Sarah after kidnapping her. The second day of the search also yielded no results, and on the morning of December 25, Christmas, thousands of people again took to the streets. Despite the holiday, none of them even thought of abandoning the case. That same day, investigators obtained data on the location of Thomas's phone. Unfortunately, it was not an exact geolocation, but rather information about his phone connecting to cellular towers. Police discovered that on the night of Sarah's disappearance, his phone connected to 3 towers, which allowed them to determine the approximate area where the man should have been. Investigators focused all their efforts in this area, located almost on the state border, approximately 14 kilometers from Sarah's aunt's house. The area was mostly forested with numerous narrow paths. Hundreds of people combed every meter of this territory, hoping for a Christmas miracle and that Sarah would be found alive. Unfortunately, reality was much more tragic. Around 4 p.m., police found a girl's body on the ground almost at the state border. She was lying on her back, with her arms twisted in such a way that they remained raised upwards, pointing to the sky. When medical examiners began to study the body, they were in for an indescribable shock. First, they confirmed that the girl had been assaulted. Second, they found signs of strangulation but determined that the perpetrator had failed to kill her in this way. The victim's lungs contained mud, leading to the conclusion that she had been attempted to be drowned in a puddle, apparently losing consciousness at that time. After this, she suffered severe burns. Investigators believe the perpetrator left her lying in that forest for some time, went to get a canister of gasoline and set Sarah on fire. Smoke was found in her lungs, indicating that she was still alive at that time. This also explained why the deceased's hands were raised and directed towards the sky. This level of brutality shocked everyone involved in the case. Even the detectives found it hard to believe that the girl had indeed been subjected to all these atrocities. However, now that they knew what had happened to Sarah, all they wanted was the death penalty for Thomas. Despite his continued denial of guilt, there was a substantial amount of evidence against him. After the body was discovered, forensic experts who examined his pickup truck more closely found several of Sarah's hairs and fabric particles from her pajamas on the front seat, further proving Thomas's involvement in the abduction. Along with all the other evidence, this practically eliminated any chance for him to avoid punishment. The wait for the trial stretched for over a year. However, it never began. In early 2011, the prosecution decided to offer Thomas a plea deal, where he would plead guilty and receive a life sentence instead of the death penalty. Given what he did to Sarah, this deal might seem unjust. However, there were very serious arguments in favor of such a decision. The main one being that the victim's younger sister would have had to repeatedly testify at the trial in the presence of the killer, giving testimony. The abduction and death of her sister were a serious ordeal for her psyche, and the trial could have impacted the girl even more strongly. Another reason for offering the deal was that the prosecution could not be 100% certain of securing a death sentence. If Thomas's lawyers managed to secure a different punishment, there could have been a chance for him to be released early. a possibility that the terms of the deal did not allow under any circumstances. Additionally, the state's governor at the time opposed the death penalty, which also decreased the chances of such a sentence being delivered. In the end, Thomas agreed and told detectives everything they already knew without his confession. He admitted to tricking the girl into leaving the house with him, after which he took her away, assaulted her, and killed her. He received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole and was transferred to a maximum security prison. In the first few days, an inmate attacked him with a makeshift knife during lunch, inflicting several serious cuts. Nevertheless, he survived, and prison staff took additional measures to protect the criminal from other inmates who wanted to get to him. Sarah's case caused a significant wave of outrage, as the system repeatedly allowed Thomas to be released and continue committing crimes. As a result, the state of Maryland passed Sarah's law, which requires anyone convicted of child molestation to serve at least 15 years in prison before they have a chance for parole.